Hello, everybody. Welcome to 3-Point Perspective, the podcast about illustration, how to do it, how to make a living at it, and how to make an impact in the world with your art. I'm Jake Parker, and I'm by myself today. Lee White and Will Terry are taking some much-needed time off, and I just came into the studio to introduce this special end-of-the-year best-of episode where I've gone through... with me and Daniel, the producer, we've picked out little snippets from all the interviews that we've done over the year. And we've found essentially a year's worth of insight and wisdom boiled down to this 1 hour-long podcast. So this year we interviewed Travis Hansen, who's an independent comic artist, Jason Edmondson, who does like pop culture art for gallery shows, John Hendricks, who's a professor and also just a phenomenal illustrator and type designer. Kelsey Rodriguez, who's an amazing YouTuber and just has a great way to build does a great job building community and relationships with others, and she's also a painter as well. We've got Kesh from India, who is like a comic artist, but he also great YouTuber who also is building a wonderful community around his work as well. Tony Cliff, a graphic novelist. Nathan Folks, who's a concept painter for animation and video games. Benjamin Shipper, another graphic novelist. Benji Davies, children's book illustrator. And finally, Doogie Horner, who is a graphic novelist and a professional comedian. So from each of these people, I went through and picked out one or two of their little golden nuggets they shared with us, little instances where my mind was like blown, or I just saw things from a different way. So sit back, enjoy. Daniel's edited these all together and get a year's worth of inspiration and wisdom in this one best of episode. All right, first up is Travis Hansen, and I like this bit where he talks about publishing through Amazon. A lot of people think Amazon's like destroying small publishers, and he's actually coming at it from a different point of view. It's been a key part of his business. And then I love this bit at the end. We'll just jump to this other clip after that one, where he tells how to figure out what your focus should be as a creator. And I really like that little bit right there.
And what about the people that hate Amazon, though?
Well, so here's what I explain, and I use it this way. You can hate Amazon all you want, but but you want to support indie publishers. You want to support indie creators. You really like to help these artists out. So when I go to a store, let's say I'm in Barnes and Noble, or let's say I go through a big publisher and I get less than 10%, and I have to wait a year to a year and a half to make any money on that book. And that big publisher is spending more time making money for them off my art than I am. And knock it off. And then, sorry. But they're making all this money on me, and I'm not making a dime for forever. Now with Amazon, now you tell me who's the big bad guy. Amazon says, hey, we'll publish everything, we'll ship it, we'll distribute it, and we'll give you 40 to 60% back on a monthly basis, and you don't have to worry about it. So who's really caring for the little creator? It is not the publisher, and it's not the bookstore. As much as I love bookstores and comic book stores and stuff like that, I know that the artist or the creator or the writer is getting just pennies on the book. Whereas with Amazon, I'm getting dollars on the book. But that's what I'm saying, because their mindset's different. Their mindset is like, I got to make a buck. I got to pay my table. I got to get this. So I'm going to try to get whatever I can out at the moment. Well, that's not the right way to look at it. You need to really kind of go, what's my long-term goal? Mm-hmm. And I was talking to this other artist, this young guy, and he said that his long-term goal was to create a book that would be totally different than anything else anybody has seen. It was going to change the world of comics. And I said, that's not a long-term goal. I go, what happens when you're done with that book? And he's like, I don't know. I go, you created nothing for you to keep moving on. And once you realize that book doesn't move, then you're going to get depressed and frustrated and will leave the business. I said, you got to look beyond that. That's why I look at myself as an illustrator, because I'm going to create multiple stories. I'm going to create multiple books. I'm going to just do what I want to do. So I'm never locked into one book. I'm always working on the new project. I've always got something else coming down the pipeline.
Yeah.
The other thing is when you're writing a book or you're creating your own IP, I listen to people and they go, yeah, I'm going to write an IP that changes the world, or I'm going to do something that's eco-friendly, or I'm going to do, we're going to do this cause here or whatever. Well, that's great. The issue is, though, is if you're writing for a cause or to change something or whatever, those books don't sell. They just don't. They have a niche audience, and that's about it. You can't get them to, it's really hard to get them out into the world. I tell people, look at that 13 to 15-year-old self that you used to be, and you write the book that 13 or 15-year-old was going to read.
Yeah.
And those are the best stories.
Yeah. And you could put your you can put your message you believe in. You put your message in there. Sneak it in.
Well, you're not even just sneaking it. It just goes in naturally.
Right.
Write the book that you would have read as a 13 or 15-year-old. Right. Create the art that you would put up in your room. And not the art that you think somebody wants to put up in their room, because more than likely they don't. And if you do that, your audience will find you. They come. You will find that there's an audience out there for anything that you do.
Okay, Jason Edmiston here. This first clip is, he talks about revenue streams, and he has this case for making art traditionally instead of working digitally. And I really liked what he had to say about that. And then the other thing that really blew my mind was how he works with licensed properties. So a lot of times you see people doing fan art that's unlicensed, and sometimes they get into hot water with the owners of the IP. And this is his strategy, or the way he does it, without getting into any sort of legal trouble.
But for the most part, all the figure art that I do is traditional, mainly because I want to be able to sell the originals as an additional point of my income. So you're asking percentages of what to get back to your question 5 minutes ago, I'm sorry. That my client work is like, say, 60%, 70% of my day, whether that be movie posters, skateboard decks, vinyl albums, toy packaging, and then say 30% would be convention, self-initiated convention art, where I'll release art prints at New York Comic Con, San Diego Comic Con, Designer Con, and then the last 10% will be private commissions or selling original art from all of those other jobs. So it's the percentages can fluctuate wildly depending on what kind of year I've had, but that's essentially what it shakes out to be. I mean, I do odd jobs every now and then, like I designed the official Halloween pinball machine last year. All the art on the entire machine, all the sides and the backboard, and even the play field. And they even took some of the art and animated it at rudimentary animation and put it in the video screen of the pinball machine too. So that was more of a labor of love, because the budget was so low on that, and I worked on it for like 5 months. But where I will make my money back on that is I have all the art that I made for that piece was all traditional. So I have all the pencils, and then because of how I don't paint on my pencils, I transpose the pencils to a board, and then I paint on those. So I have all the pencils for those pieces, and then I have all the paintings separately for those pieces. And I will be selling all of that art eventually. So I will make far more, hopefully. Halloween fans are rabid, and I have a fairly good following for my original art. So hopefully if I sell all of that art, that will, be multiple times more than I got paid for the original job. But I had that in mind when I made it, and that's why I made that art traditional. I could have done it a lot quicker digitally, but that would have been the end of any kind of sales from that work. And that's what
I build on that technique where I'll do the actual piece digital, and then I use that basically as a really finished color study for the traditional piece, which I then sell. Yeah,
you're just doing it retroactively, but it's the same amount of labor.
Same idea. Yeah. But I'm glad to hear you're doing that, because
for sure
it is. I always recommended that model to my students. Like, there is a market for original artwork, and we're making all this artwork anyway. Yeah. And I rarely hear people doing that. like selling it in so many different ways. Like you have your client sell and then the original sell and then possibly print sales
Absolutely. Yep.
as well. And so it's a kind of a
three-prong approach. Also, if you own the, sorry to cut you off, but if you own the license, license, or at least you own the license for that image, say I did a piece for, just because I wanted to go on that point, sorry to cut you off, but to that point exactly, I did a licensed piece for a DVD release of Child's Play. And I guess Warner Brothers or whoever owns that property, they own the image. They own the character, but I own the image. So I did the painting traditionally. They paid for the rights to use it for the DVD. I sold the painting and I sold the pencils, and I got the license to sell prints later. And then also when it gets relicensed, because Fright Rags or whoever wants to come out with a t-shirt, they came to me, and although they had the license for the character, they had to pay me to use the image again. And that was also made into a toy. So I sold that one image like 3 or 4 times, and sold the original and sold prints. So you basically so imagine how many hours you spend on that image from client calling you to you completing it. 3-4 days, 5 days at most. You've turned those 5 days into multiple revenue streams. So you try to maximize that work as much as possible, because you've already done the work. Why not sell it, 5, 6, 7 times? And I hear you guys talking about that, and I want to encourage other artists to do that as well. I just think too many artists are working solely digital, and that's the end of their work. When they complete it, that's it. They'll sell it once, and that's it. So.
One little
I'm so happy to hear
question in the middle of that. You said that you got the license for the image after Warner Brothers. How did you go about doing that?
I can do that. Well, that's a kind of a regular, a semi-regular way that I'm starting to do more now. Like I've sold, I know you guys have on smaller, to smaller degrees at some points in your careers, have sold prints or put images of fan art in books or whatever. It's kind of a gray area, and I know some companies look the other way because it's positive promotion. Some kind of like that's our property, you have to pay us for the license. So it's do at your own risk. That being said, I'm getting my own licenses directly from the license holders, because once you start doing official licensed work, you have a little bit of whatever you call it, reputation or juice in the industry or whatever you want to call it. You can actually find out contact info for these license holders and go directly to them and say, hey, I want to put out a poster for Halloween, or I've gone to Elvira's estate, or I've gone to 2000 AD to get a Judge Dredd license, or all these different Miramax I've talked to get my own license. And they you negotiate a percentage or a flat fee or something, and they'll give you a contract to do a print release based on a pitch. And I've taken that I've taken that deal, and I've gone and made some art, that's approved by them and above board, done my run of prints, also given them a smaller percentage of samples for their archives, and then paid them 15% or a flat fee or something up front. And we all make money on it. And I'm thinking, well, why didn't I do this earlier? I don't need a company to work for when I can go directly to the source and license it from them. I don't need to go to a t-shirt company that has the Nightmare on Elm Street license and just get paid a flat fee. I can go right to, New Line or whoever owns it now and say, I want to do a Freddy poster. And they say, okay, we want 15%. And I can do a run of 300 posters and make a few $1,000s, or even $10,000, depending on if you sell 300 posters, screen print posters for $60 a piece or whatever, and the original art on top of that, it really is much smarter if you have the ability to go directly to the licensor. I think they just try to teach you when you're young that, you need a company to do that, because they don't want you going directly to the company. They don't want you to know the secret handshake to get in the back door. But once you know, it's not that hard. You just do it yourself,
Right.
I would think that would help sales too, because you could even say, oh, this is officially licensed from the, it just looks more official and higher profile.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. It gives you some weight, and then other companies will approach you directly, knowing that you're kind of a legitimate company, not trying to, just put out bootleg products. Because even the biggest companies, a lot of them started out doing, bootleg releases until they got big enough where they're like, oh no, we have to actually get licenses now. I won't name any companies, but I mean, there's a lot of them that you're aware of that's how they started out their business model. And now they're all legitimate because it's too big to run roughshod, right? So
right. All right, really enjoyed this conversation with John Hendricks, and I pulled this clip here that's on the act of creating, just being the reward itself. I really liked what he had to say there. And then the second clip with him is John's secret to the creative life and how he, I guess his advice to connect with other artists and to find community, and how that's such a key component to creativity.
But that goes to the idea that, the person that has, and this is me, by the way, who had a guitar for like 10 years. And I used to say, this is when I was in high school, I really want to play the guitar. No, I didn't, because I never did.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so I like the idea of time warping to a time where I could play the guitar, skipping over all that pesky work. Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I challenge people when they say they really want something, and I'm like, well, what are you doing? Because your life is being lived in a way that is the opposite of that. You don't want that, at least right now.
Well, I see students all the time who I think study illustration because they are interested mostly in the illustration content. Like that illustration is the thing that allows them to get to the content that they really love, but not the actual act of drawing and making.
They're the last ones to set up their paints and the first ones to pack up in class.
Yeah, right. And I don't think those are lost like souls. I don't think that means they won't be illustrators. Right. What I try to get them to unlock is like whatever that thing is, where you will sit down and do it with no one prompting you, that, if you can kind of dig in that spot, you'll eventually find that kernel of the voice of the thing you want to continue to do.
That's really good. So
I really think that is hard. I think right now a lot of people are struggling with that feeling of isolation in our work, in our community, whatever that may be. Social media is not a replacement for human interaction. It's just not. And it's a way to extend what we already have into that space. So I always tell people, if they're not around a major hub in New York or LA or whatever it is, I guarantee that there are people in your area that are interested in what you're interested in. And a good old fashioned drink and draw together is just so fun. And you go to, it doesn't have to be beer, it could be coffee, whatever it is. Get 6 or 7 people around a table, you get a drink, you have your sketchbook, and you just work, but in community. And it's that feeling of like not being stuck with your work, but also having one another to bounce ideas off of. That kind of thing in concert with your own private work and writing and time and isolation and reflection. To me, that's the secret to a rich creative life is the combination of fellowship and community along with that personal alone time. And I don't think you can have one or the other. I think you need both to make your best work. So trying to find that community, whether it's SCBWI or a local chapter of, a small press club or whatever that thing is, try to find those people that are interested in it in your area.
Next up is Kelsey Rodriguez. In this clip, she explains what a busy, seasoned illustrator can do to have like a successful YouTube channel. The big question is, how do you make a YouTube channel? What do you use for content for your YouTube channel when you're so busy working and a lot of the stuff you are working on is, behind an NDA and you can't really share it? Okay. So I guess for me, then it's like, because I did have this sort of epiphany at one point where it's like, in 10 years, do I want to have 10 graphic novels or like 100 YouTube videos, right? And it's sort of like this either or thing. Like I could put all my time into making videos, or I could put all my time into like making books. And the epiphany was, you got to kind of do both. like for every time you make something, there has to be this balance of marketing it, like sharing it with people. And by marketing, I mean sharing it.
The reason that hers works better than ours does is that I'm looking at like her work, beautiful landscapes and scenery and stuff like that. but it's not NDA. Like our stuff is sort of like I'm working on a book right now. Like you guys are on one screen and on my other screen is a 32-page picture book that I can't show anybody. And it's going to still take 6 more weeks of just the drawings that cannot be shared. I can't do a video on like, hey, watch me draw this thumbnail for this book because I can't talk about it yet. But hers is 1-to-1. Like if you're painting something that day, you can make a video on it that night and show it. Like, so it's a little more immediate for her content than for an illustrator whose work is going to be released in the future, if that makes sense. Am I reading that correct?
I would kind of recenter that point, though. I totally get what you're saying, but you also have experience, industry connections, and knowledge that I don't, that you can leverage to grow your following on social media. Like, you are a far more skilled, experienced artist than I am that has lots of connections in the industry, right? Like you said it yourself, like you've worked in the industry for forever and you have all of this stuff that's worked in NDA. Maybe you can't show your art directly right now, but like you are underselling yourself if you think that that's only like the only thing that you have to offer. There are plenty of channels like Light Ponderings and Adam Duff, two of my great friends. Light Ponderings worked, I think, for Naughty Dog Studios. They've worked on just tons of really cool projects like Westworld. He used to work for Pixar. He dabbled a little bit in like just some really great stuff. He's like an expert when it comes to color and light and doing these lighting studies. And what Jeremy does right now, what Light Ponderings does right now, is he just teaches stuff on his YouTube channel. He just is like, okay, like, let me show you how this works. So let me talk about what it was like to work in the film and animation industry and all of these really cool jobs and these positions and like these sets that I worked on with like literal movie stars and celebrities that like young artists are so interested in hearing about. That's not a thing that I can talk about, but that's the thing that you guys can talk about.
I just had a huge light bulb go on that I feel so stupid. That was a great answer, Kelsey. That was really good because I just realized I'm thinking like the thing I'm doing today is the thing that I need to put out tonight on as a video, but that's not I mean, I've done 27 books. Like I've got so much content that I could say, oh, look at the storytelling of this piece or how color theory was used like this in all the other content, instead of thinking that my current image is what needs to be shown at the same time. I'm so stupid. I need to leave this meeting. I need to go make a video.
In your guys' case, your audience, probably like people who are like 5 years behind you in terms of their career, right? When you're making content, think of like, okay, if that person were to be in front of me right now, what would they want to pick my brain about? Or like, what would I want to pick someone else's brain about 5 years ago? What information would have been really valuable for me then that would have like catapulted my career into the stratosphere or made my art just like so much better? And that's content that like I can't make. Someone who, you know, is 3 years behind me can't make. Someone who's an expert at portrait painting can't make. Like that is experience that is unique to you and knowledge that like you have this amazing monopoly over that you should be taking advantage of. Yeah.
You just shifted my whole view of this whole thing. That's amazing.
You're welcome.
Next up is Kesh. And I loved his answer, this little bit that he says about how sacrifice can lead to major gains. I really liked his perspective on that.
Artists now, and you guys can correct me if you don't feel this way, but you're juggling. And it's just that whichever ball you're holding at the time, there's 2 more in the air. You know what I mean? And then you throw that ball up and you catch another ball, you know, and you work on that one. And so it just always feels that way to me. And I've yet to crack the code to where I'm just holding one ball and that's the only thing I'm working on. That's
the challenge, huh? A couple of things that at least I've learned. I literally learned last week, which I just learned the meaning of sacrifice, what it actually means to sacrifice. So I'm not going to get into the details of it. So I was thrown into a situation where I had to do something, and I had to give up my favorite piece of clothing. Right. It was like I had to give my favorite piece of clothing. It was a sort of like a situation, right? Now, I thought I'll just give some sort of a clothing, my clothes, right, for that thing. But I was supposed to, as per that thing, I was to give something that I really liked. Then, but the thing that I would get out of that would be something that I really want. then I was like, so maybe that would possibly be the definition of sacrifice, which is you give something like that you like so that you get something that you absolutely love. And I was like, okay, so I kind of like this art project. So then that made me help make a little bit of shift. Say last week, which was like, I had 2 projects that I wanted to do. I was like, I kind of like this. I really like this, but I love this. And I was like, what can I live without? Maybe I cannot live without this one. But yeah, I mean, so that was a interesting thing, because I'm sort of very interested in the idea of sacrifice very lately, because it is like it's a problem that I myself struggle with, and I see a lot of folks, artist types, struggle with, which is we have very many projects and things that we want to do, but the very idea, the very nature of actually getting good at things sort of lies in giving up certain things for a very short period of time, and then sort of going in a very unidimensional way to the top, and then sort of getting good at that point, and then you can choose to jump ship to a thing, but you have leverage at that point, or leverage, or sort of perspective or vantage point. So yeah, I mean, that's something that I've been sort of mulling on for a while. And yeah.
All right, next up we have Tony Cliff, and I really like this clip. It's about charting your course or your career and how you should really start small before you make a big project, and really what's the best way to spend your time. The whole conversation with Tony was great, so if you get a chance, go back, and especially if you're wanting to get into comics and have like a realistic view of it, go back and check that whole episode. But for now, let's listen to this clip. So here's the question. Today, your experience is a 10-year plus long experience in comics, but today, for someone who's rolling up, whether they're in their 40s or in their 20s, and they're wanting to do comics, what would be your like straight up advice? Like, we've said all the perils, the dangers that go into this, but regardless of those, what would be your just point blank advice on how to go about like charting that course, getting through that runway?
That's so tricky, because there's just, you can't, I am so loath to tell anybody you should do this or you should do that or you should do this, because even since we started this, even since Flight Comics days, everything has changed so much. There is nothing about my experience specifically that I could say to anybody,
do what I did, right?
Yeah, do what I did. The only things that I think definitely hold true are, I think there's great value in starting small, and finishing a small thing. Get a small thing finished before trying to get out there and absolutely crush a 10,000 page project. Just get something small so you know every aspect of the process.
Like even do a 5-page story. See how you like that.
Yeah, write it, draw it, color it, do all of it, because. Also, when you're done, congratulations. You're not an aspiring author anymore. You are an author.
Yeah.
You did it. You made the thing. That holds true. I think about how you want to spend your hours. When I was in my 20s and I was working in animation, obviously, I just wanted to work at Pixar, or I wanted to work at Disney, or I wanted to work on these, with passion pictures, making those cool music videos and commercials and stuff, because they were amazing. They were pushing the boundaries, that sort of thing. And then a thing happened as I spent more time working and I spent more time in the industry. I'm realizing, like, I'm spending, 40, 50 hours a week in the studio. Like, this is my life.
Right.
That I'm living.
How you spend your days is how you spend your life, right? Like,
exactly. And I found that, like I described before, like the value of being in a room with people you like. You know, maybe I'm working on, I don't know, maybe I'm working on some, you know, one series animated thing. You know, it's never going to go past one series. It's just this, you know, the voice acting's poor or something, but I get to spend every day in a room. Man, I can think of one show which was exactly this. It was such a bad show, but I got to go. I was so excited to go in every day because I was spending my time every day in a room with 3 other guys who were just a blast to be around.
Right.
Like,
didn't matter what you were working on because you're busting up all day long, right?
Yeah, it was just such a lovely thing. So, you know, I encourage people to maybe think about that, give that some thought. And then I don't know. Like if you're going to do it, you're probably just going to do it.
Mm-hmm. All right, Nathan Folks, he gave us this little tidbit here that I like, this couple minutes here where he talks about staying sharp with daily practice. A lot of times when you're a professional, you feel like you don't have time to improve your abilities, or maybe you're using your job, your work to improve your abilities. But he talks about how he always, well, I'll just let him talk about it. Here's Nathan. I wanted to ask you, This actually relates to a question we took last week on the podcast or a few weeks ago, and that was, how much time should you devote to studying versus actually like making, you know, professional work, a portfolio piece? You know, obviously deadlines influence that if you're working for, you know, a client, whatnot. But how do you balance, or what's your advice for that balance between devoting time to studying versus devoting time to actual making professional portfolio pieces?
Yeah, I mean, the ideal is, because we're all so busy, you know, I know you guys to some degree, and you know, some of you have families, and there's so much going on. So I recommend trying to get in an hour a day on top of everything else you're doing. Whether you're a student or me now, that's still my goal, is to get an hour a day on top of everything, because I always have to have fresh ideas coming in, or turn my head to something a little bit new and different. But better than that, you know, we all know that you're not going to get an hour a day in every day. There may be a lot of days that you don't. My advice to students always is, even if it's just opening your sketchbook and doing a 5-minute doodle, yeah, that 5 minutes isn't going to make a difference in your career. But the thing that will make the difference is you kept the daily habit in place by opening your sketchbook and doing something. You kept the habit in place. And that habit of anywhere from a 5-minute doodle to 1 hour of practice, you know, every single day, you know, 5 or 6 days a week, give yourself a break, you know, give yourself a day off a week. But that habit over the course of a year and years is going to make a huge difference.
For that hour that you're doing for your own time now, is that still doing sort of landscape studies, because you are a gallery artist and you do that kind of stuff, or is there something else that you do during that time now?
Yeah, that's the other thing I don't want to admit to, because I'm still the same guy who did those, you know, played hooky by doing those El Dorado, you know, studies out the window of industrial area of Glendale. So, you know, you're painting along, and we're all, you know, most of us are digital, but I know you guys as well like to do some traditional work and digital, and me too. I love watercolors, gouache, whatever it is. So I'll be painting along in Photoshop, and oh man, you know, I really wish I was working on like a personal watercolor. Like I was out with the kids and took some pictures, and I could make something really great out of that with watercolor. And so I'll be painting along like, I'm going to just, you know, I'm going to play hooky, and I'm going to pull out, and I actually have right in front of me right now, under my computer desk, I have a table. And if I pull it out, and I can do it right now, it's there. All my watercolors are on that table. And I have a drawer, and if I pull it open right now, there's fresh water in those drawers and all my brushes right now. And so I can just pull it out, open the drawer, and start painting, and pop up a reference on my computer screen.
Wow.
Watercolor. and I'll
That's
play
awesome.
hooky. But then inevitably what happens is I'm painting along with the watercolor, and I'll think, oh man, it's coming along all right, but I wish I had Photoshop filters right now because I wish the whole thing was a little bit warmer, and this is watercolor. And then I start to miss digital painting, and I start to hate watercolor. And then I'll be enthusiastic to go back to my concept art. So, you know how all of us have that grass is always, no matter what we're doing, even if it's a cool thing, we still have a grass is always greener kind of attitude. So I play that against myself, do the one, switch to the other, back and forth. And then I get to the end of the day and I've actually been kind of productive. So it works out for me.
Now we have Benjamin Shipper. Really love this conversation we had with Benjamin. And I like this bit where he talks about balancing your work with gaining life experiences. And I'll just let you listen to it to hear what he has to say about it.
The like business versus art, like pie or whatever, the half that people will think about. I think they're thinking about art creation as far as like you're sitting in a chair, you're drawing or you're writing. And then business is this, and it looks like these very things. But I'd love to like create more of an art, but the art is more about living, and then how do you translate those experiences and that truth into your work? So yeah, I'm not drawing even though I'm not doing the publishing, I'm not drawing all the time, I'm not writing all the time. I'm trying to become a whole person that is able to understand and empathize and to know about life in order to when I sit down and draw, to really have something to say.
Right. You don't want to be an empty well.
Yeah.
And I was listening to an interview with Mr. Beast just this week, and he went through this phase where he's like, I cut out everything in my life that didn't directly help me make videos, right? So he's like, I wouldn't play a video game because I knew if I spent 2 hours a day on this video game, at the end of the month, that's 60 hours. That's another video he could have made that he didn't make because he made video games. And he's like, I didn't want a girlfriend because I knew girlfriends took a lot of time, and that would mean less videos would get made or worse videos would get made. And he's like, I didn't want anything addictive in my life because I knew addiction would take me away from making videos. And then he said, but at one point I realized, like, he's like, I was doing the math, figuring out this algorithm he had going in his head, where he's like, I'm starting to sound like a robot on my videos. Like, I don't have a personality. All I know in my life is video making. And so he's like, I realized, oh, maybe I need some life experiences so that when I talk on these videos, I'm more relatable to people. And he's like, so then he started carving out time in his life to have a girlfriend, to, watch some TV, to go out and explore or do whatever, just so that his videos would be more relatable. And I think that is, and this is, I mean, Mr. Beast is 25 years old and he's still very, very young in his life, figuring stuff out. But I think that's something that any age you can kind of get lost in, where you think, I've just got to create, I got to make. And no, you have to have something to pull from, to draw from in life in order to create. All right, here we have Benji Davies, and I was just wondering how this guy was so prolific. Like, he has all these great children's books that he's done over the last several years, and he talks about how he was able to make these books and really the importance of focus. So check this out. How are you so prolific? Are you just grinding every day, or is it more of like, you know what, I'm just going to try and put something out every year, and I'll get to it, and I'll fit in everything else in my life?
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel like I am that prolific. So that's quite interesting to hear. I think, I mean, I got to a point where I did 2 books in 1 year, the same year that my daughter was born, 2017, and then that kind of winter, spring, I think, maybe in that following year, and sort of like that following spring, summer, I was working on 2 books. I was working on Tad and Grandma Bird at the same time, and it did nearly ruin me.
Okay.
And so I was like, I'm never going to do 2 books. I'm never going to do not write and illustrate 2 picture books at the same time. So and what I do now is, I think because of times where I've just got too bogged down with work, it's like I separate it all out, and I make sure my aim is always to just work on one thing at a time and not to be juggling more than one thing, because the thing is just sort of muddies what you're doing and just makes it stressful. So really, like one picture book. Like now at the moment, I've sort of slowed it right down. So I'm doing like 1 author illustrator book every other year. And then on the alternate years, it's giving me a bit of breathing space to do something else. So I might work on some fiction illustrations, like black and white illustrations for another author. And then like in the sort of winter period, so the other books that I do are called Busy Bear. So they're a series of novelty board books published by Nosy Crow in the UK, and then Candlewick, part of Candlewick here. And I do them, and I sort of I have like a sort of schedule where I do them like from like sort of September to like January, and we do like sort of three titles.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so we do those, and then because there's about 30 of those now.
Wow,
and then
that's amazing. So you've divided up your life sort of to fit these different areas, so you don't feel bored, and you're always creating something new, and you're not just in a rut.
And not sort of too. I find it quite stressful just having too many plates.
I could learn a thing or two from him.
It's amazing you've been able to do that, because most of the illustrators we talk to, at least the ones in the US, have like all these things going on. It's like they're doing conventions, and they're selling prints, and they're doing gallery shows, and they're writing books and teaching, and it's all this stuff. And Jake and I fall victim to that big time, including doing a podcast. What are we doing, Jake? We need to get back to drawing.
This is our last episode.
This is the last one. But it's just it's great to hear that you've balanced it out, and you figured out how to make the timing work and the finances work, and all of it kind of together.
Yeah, I think there's sort of like I've been lucky with some of the things where, so like with Busy Bear, for example, that's sold like all over the world. And it's sort of almost that's kind of enabled me to then open up the rest of my schedule a little bit. I guess though equally the author illustrator stuff has got my name out there and still my like in 40 languages or something now, so
right, that's a big deal.
So and it's like enabled me to then have this luxury of being able to sort of control the schedule a little bit more and give myself breathing space to do things. But it's almost an experiment each time. You kind of go, okay, let's try it this way and see if like separating it out. And that's almost where like this year I would have probably done another picture book, but because I was like, no, I'm going to do the show for it needed its own time slot carving out, because I knew that I would, I could have kept offsetting it for years and years. So I was like, I was like, let's do it.
So you turned off the picture book stuff for now, and said, hey, I'm just going to focus on this show. That's
just on this for this year. Yeah. So, well, not for the whole year, but for this sort of season. So I would have started a new one.
And our last one is Doogie Horner. I love this story where he talks about how he got an agent and how he works with agents. And I think it's funny, but it's also, I think, really good advice.
I got my first agent years ago. So years and years ago, when I was doing stand-up, an editor asked me to write a book about doing stand-up. And so I did, and the publisher passed on it, but the editor felt bad. He's like, I feel bad I asked you to do this. Let me get you an agent, and they can send it to other publishers for you. But the editor was the editor of Donnie Brasco.
Oh.
And the agent he got me was Donnie Brasco's agent. He was a mob. He only represented mob guys. He represented Joey Bananas, right? Joseph Bonanno, Donnie Brasco, guys like this. So he's like a really tough So he calls me up. He goes, "Yeah, I looked at your little book, and yeah, I think I want to be your agent." And I said, "Okay, well, let me think about it." And there was this deadly silence. And then he goes, "What the fuck is there to think about?" I was like, "You know what? Great point. What there is, you're my agent." And so he sold my first book, Everything Explained Through Flowcharts. And he called me up on the phone. He goes, "Yeah, so I'm over here at HarperCollins, and they just made an offer on your book." And he told me the number, and it was way bigger than I expected. And I was like, "That's great." And he said, I told him, "You double it." And I was like, "What? Why would you say that?" And they did, but then they did. So
Wow.
That's amazing. Cause I'm sure he gave him an offer they couldn't refuse, right?
exactly. So he was my agent for a little bit, and then I left him, and then I got another person, and then I got another person. But the last agent I got, the agent I have right now, is really good. And he's been really helpful to me. Like, he works with me. He's been a great agent, and I know about him from publishing because I have friends that are editors, and I was like, who is a good agent? And they recommended him. So that's been helpful. And
So
then
really quick though, how did you leave the first agent?
So
and how are you still alive?
Yeah.
The mob,
Are
the mob
you
guy.
allowed to leave?
So my second book was 100 Ghosts, and he didn't like it.
Mm.
And so I left him because I liked it. And then I got another agent, and then that didn't work out. And so
Well, can we unpack that just because we get that question every so often? Like, how do you leave an agent? Was it just as simple as an email? Was it a phone call?
I just emailed him. I said, "Well, if you don't like the book, then I'm gonna find someone else to sell it."
Mm.
He didn't even write back to me. I think his secretary was like, "All right, see ya." There were no tears on his end.
I love it. So I think people overcomplicate things way too much, and really, I mean, it's business. It's not like your best buds.
No, it's not personal. I mean, if you're with an agent for a long time, it becomes a mix of. But it's personal. It's like some, the person who shares the cubicle next to you. It's
you
know what I mean. It's you wouldn't be together if you weren't doing business. You know,
right. All right, that should wrap it up for this year. Again, thank you for listening to this this podcast, for sitting through all of our discussions, our disagreements and our agreements, and hopefully you have actually learned something brand spanking new this year. We'll be back again together next episode with Will, Lee, and I with our plans for the new year. But until then, I hope your holidays are good. I hope that peace is finding you, and I'll just take us out now. This podcast is brought to you by SVSLearn.com, where becoming a great illustrator starts. Your hosts traditionally usually are Will Terry, Lee White, and me, Jake Parker. Of course, you know that unless this is the first time you've listened to this podcast. If so, welcome. Glad to have you here. Podcast produced by Daniel Tu. That's Daniel TU, and you can find his work at daniel2.co. Special thanks to our keeper of curriculum, Austin Shirtliff, our show notes wrangler, Lily Howell, our chief operations officer, Lisa Fott. Now, go draw something.